I am so thrilled to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast. This is a very Bris Vegas author focused episode. We've got Jade Miller in the house and Mel Loy. Great to have you both here today.
Hello, thanks for having us.
It's always great to see you both, whether it's virtual or in person as well. And I mean, we are in the same city and we have all written our first book, which is so exciting. And the reason why I brought you both on to this podcast episode, just riffing on this whole sort of creation process. Jade, I might kick off with you. If you can just share a bit about your book and the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So I have written Making Lemonade. This book is, I would call it a guide to getting through tough times, but there's a lot of great things in here. So it's filled with personal stories, practical exercises, a lot of existential humor. My subtitle is, an antidote to the existential crisis. So there's an element of humor with this. So if you like a bit of self-development with a side of humor and not taking things too seriously, this is the book for you.
Amazing. And I think you've caught all listeners when you talked about practical exercises. That's what we're all about. Thank you, Jade. And Mel, over to you.
I also want to say with Jade's book, I really love the frameworks you've developed in there as well, like from based on your own experience, which is really cool because it's not one of those woo-woo, self-help books. It's such a practical piece. So well done, you. So yeah, my book is Change Isn't Hard. You can see I've got my sticky notes in there. And it is a practical playbook for people-centered change communication. So it steps through the framework I've developed around change comms, which really puts people at the center of it all. And the reason I call it Change Isn't Hard is because change isn't hard, but people are hard. So once you understand people and how they communicate, how they respond to change, that just makes things so much easier.
Yeah, and I think like as workshop hosts, I think we are in the business of change, and the reason we're in there is to lead some of that people centered and driven change, make it all real, sort of tackle questions, objections, all of that as well. There's got to be some sort of change that happens. Like otherwise, why do you host a workshop if it's going to remain the same? Congratulations, first of all, for bringing this out. It's a big feat to actually hit publish and do this work. And what I'm really curious to dive into is the creation process. I think my book is about workshop design, and it is a highly creative process. Yet when I first started doing workshop design, I just opened PowerPoint to start, dumping ideas. I didn't treat it in that creative way. I'm curious to learn about your process for crafting your book. And Jade, I'll go to you again because you are a very creative person, and you love to draw, and you got all these amazing different hobbies that you do. That I just I'm in awe of your talent. How did you find the process of writing a book, which is like quite linear, right? How did you approach that?
Well, I think I started a bit like you in terms of a brain dump, and I had a lot of words, a lot of ideas, and it didn't really have a formula or a structure to it. I really worked with it, I guess, like a big lump of clay, and was like, I have to shape this into something that's understandable. As I went through the writing process and I started editing, I realized that actually what became clear was a process within what I was talking about. So the book is in three sections. It starts with, and this is sort of my philosophy on creating workshops and work as well. So it starts with you, it starts with the self and some of that self development, self awareness, looking at the way that you like to communicate, the way that you like to prioritize things. And then we move out, once we've done that, then we move out to relationships and how you relate to people. So, in a work sense, that might be stakeholders, customers, your workmates, the team. And then from there, then we look at all of that in the context of the bigger picture. So in the book, it's about the world, and there's some big questions about existence and the world and the systems that we live within, which are a little bit challenging for some people. I've had a bit of feedback that is a
Oh,
challenge that can be challenging.
yeah.
But I guess to relate that to a work sense or in a workshop, then you're looking at those things in relation to your organization and the context of your organization and the context that your customers or clients or stakeholders are within. So I did start with a really big mess and then shaped it into how I approach life and then shared it that way.
Yeah, it's a really great call out about the system that we operate in. And so you could run the same exact workshop, but throw in different people, different clients, and it's dramatically different based on like the culture, the system, processes, everything, right? And that's what makes our work so exciting. And Mel, I'm curious to hear your creative process. Like, did you have a lump of clay like Jade and I did, or did you, I have a feeling that you've been running these workshops for clients and you've just taken the best of and put that into a book. Is that what you did, or did you do something quite different?
Yeah, sort of. I developed the framework previously to use in workshops. So absolutely. And that's part of because I realized there's so much out there on change management, but not a lot on change comms specifically. In fact, there's hardly anything out there. And it's usually wrapped up into other training like pro sci kind of scenarios. So I developed the framework and then I kind of, the way I love a good matrix. So the way I actually started mapping out the book was to have a bit of a matrix of, okay, well, there's each of these sections of the framework. So that's basically my chapters, which made it easier. And then down the other side of the matrix was, okay, well, what's the introductory story going to be? What are the facts I'm going to bring in? And kind of mapped it out that way. So I kind of created a map of how I was going to write. So for me, that really helped organize my thoughts. And of course, by the time I actually came to write it, those things did change and whatever. And I was kind of, it was helpful in a way. This sounds weird. It was helpful. I was in hospital and I'd had some unexpected surgery and I was like, I'm bored. I may as well just start writing. So that sort of gave me an impetus to just start. And the first draft, as I'm sure both of you can attest to, was very drafty. But getting that out was kind of the important part. And there's so much that I've brought into workshops or wanted to, that I'm like, yeah, it can come into one manual almost and bring it together in that way. Without, in a workshop situation, I'll take you through the same framework, but it'll obviously be much more interactive. We'll do different things, we'll do fun things, but this is kind of the backup to that. So if I'm running a few workshops on change comms in the next few months, and I've said, the book is kind of the way that you cement the learning afterwards. Do the framework, do the training first, and then use the book as kind of that way to go back and remind yourself or to go deeper on some of the things that we don't get a chance to cover in a workshop because we just don't have the time.
Yeah, it's a nice artifact. Actually, that you raised a good point, Mel. That was the hardest thing when I was writing my book, I'm like, this has to be purely self-directed.
Yeah.
Like someone must be able to read this and get it. Whereas we're so used to having like, oh, maybe that I shared that it was half baked, but someone will ask me a question on it and we'll share examples and we'll go into it. But there's no opportunity. You have to like how much do I spell this out and how much do I pull back on? Did you find that as part of the sort of editing process?
Yeah, there's definitely the curse of knowledge, which we all have, and particularly when it comes to comms. And so that's where having early editors and early readers really helped to go like, what are you talking about here? I'm like, oh yeah, people don't know that thing. So I think that helped definitely in kind of understanding, okay, well, what do I need to include? What don't I need to include? What do I need to explain more? And where have I gone too far down a rabbit hole that I need to actually pull it back? Yeah.
And you use the word drafty, which I really like. It makes it more fun.
It's a drafty draft.
Drafty draft. Yeah. It's like, hey, it kind of loses the weight of like, oh my gosh, like I think, I don't know, Jade definitely saw an early drafty draft of what I pulled out. And I honestly felt like I had just vomited everything I knew about workshops into a Word document. That's what it felt like. And Jade, we're talking about this now as we've released the book, but you've been working on your book. You've been thinking about this for some time, haven't you? I mean, when did your idea for a book emerge?
Well, actually, similarly to Mel, I was really ill when I first started writing my book. And that was 5 years ago. And yeah, and it was just that real get this all out and then figure it out later. I think some people start writing thinking they have to have it all together and thinking they have to have the structure and it has to be very, follow a method. But I'm a fan of the word vomit and then work with it later. I think that's a good process.
Vomit, then mop it up for sure.
Yeah.
We've got some people here that host their own workshops and they're probably thinking like us, like, we were thinking, hey, I'm running these workshops. Surely there's a book in this. Do you have any sort of advice or ways of thinking around how do you turn like the ideas and things that you're hosting with groups into something that is that artifact? Mel, I'll go to you first.
I think the biggest thing, and not just with writing a book, but any comms, is having a structure. So start with a structure, and that structure can change. That's okay. But I think it just helps you go like that logical flow of ideas, at least to start with. And it can be as simple as introduction, three key points I want to cover, and how I'm going to wrap it up. Start there and go from there. But I think, yeah, get a structure in place that can help you take all these ideas and things you've been teaching people and put them in a logical flow. That would be my top tip. Jade, over to you.
Yeah, I think, and this is a bit what I loved about your book and what I love about your approach to comms, Mel, is that people, and you said this in your book, it's about people over deliverables. And so I think having a human-centered approach to it, that it's about a person. So who's the person that you want to talk to? Who do you want this book to be for? Who, and if you have been running workshops for a long time, you know, who are your main people? You could probably quite easily figure out a persona from, you know, a lot of people that you've been working with, and there's probably some similarity there. So use that as a persona, as a starting point. And yeah, having that who, what is it, why are you doing it, and how are you going to do it, just as a really good starting point, as a basis, I think.
I'm interested to know from you guys, and sorry, I'm hijacking the conversation now, but I know both of you did some sort of author, like book writing course, whereas I just kind of honestly looked at what you guys were doing, read a lot of books, and you know, the structures that I liked and the way people wrote that I wanted to emulate. So I did do it in a very, I guess, a bit messier way. But what did you learn from the courses that you did in terms of how to get started?
The probably my favorite lesson. So I sort of cherry pick my favorite lessons and then create my own approach. Well, I don't even know if I'll call it an approach, just a way of doing it. My favorite from Alan Weiss would be just don't overthink it, don't edit. Writing and editing are very different. And just to see him when he was in Brisbane, actually, for that workshop, I think in the space of 30 seconds, someone gave him a book topic and he created 8 chapter titles. So the propensity to overthink, like just get past that and like just vomit the things out. This is very, yeah. And I think then the other thing would be, don't assume that more, you know, in our workshops, right? We think, oh, more time is more value, more content is more value. No, it's actually about, you want to get people the results. How do you do that in the most efficient way possible? So while I see people, I've got friends that post and they're like, oh, I've written 25,000 words. My goal is 45,000 words. It's like, why? Why is 45,000 words the goal? You're like, so it's just change that assumption. And my goal was, I want to give people confidence, and you get confidence when you finish a book. How can I like cut the heck out of this and give them a result really quickly? So those were probably the 2 things. And I got that second approach from Rob Fitzpatrick, who wrote the book Write Useful Books and also has a book on workshops. So yeah. Jade, what about you?
Yeah, so I think I joined the Expert Author Academy with Kelly Irving, and there was so much value in that. But like you say, one of the biggest things was not worrying about word count. And I think a lot of people who start writing are thinking, I need to write a book, it has to be 60,000 words. A book is this many words. That's, again, it's not people centered, that's deliverable centered, that's outcome centered. It's not about, you know, like you're talking about, you want people to feel confident in running a workshop when you finish the book. I want people to feel like they've learned something about themselves, something new about themselves, and change the way that they think. There's just, you've got to find that outcome for the person, not for, you know, this.
Yeah. It even comes back to, like, I'm doing marathon training. I know, Mel, you're doing your first triathlon as well later this year, which is really exciting.
Failing at it, yes. But continue.
But I think
you're both doing better than I am.
I don't know. You haven't seen me swim.
Oh, you haven't seen, I mean, that's why I won't even touch the triathlon. The running of, like, my marathon plan, it's not around what kilometers you do. It's like, how much time are you dedicating to it, right? And so even with writing, it was more about, rather than waking up and going, I need to do 500 words, it's more like, just sit down in the seat for 20 minutes. And if you can do that, it's a win. So those micro wins, did you have, and like, then I had to like go to cafes and get out of my space because I would get distracted. That daily practice. And I think a lot of workshop hosts, there's kind of 2 camps, people that will design a workshop 2 weeks before and they've got everything ready and printed and it's beautiful. And then someone like me who, yeah, I might have a plan, but then I'll sort of land it and converge on it maybe 1 or 2 days before and really get stuck into it. What type of writer were you?
I was a very random writer. I would I mean, my life is kind of full, so I had lots of things to work around. So my main goal was really just to finish it. So I would do bits and pieces whenever the inspiration struck, because I had this ultimate goal to finish it, but not, not to the word count, just to finish the book as I felt that it was finished. So it's the goal of just getting to the end of the project, not and that outcome for people. Like, I'm creating this for people.
Yeah, in terms of sort of my approach, I know when I create workshops, I often have an epiphany like 2 days before or a day before. I'm like, I've got to change everything. And that's kind of what I did with the book as well, to a degree, because I'd had all these random sort of pieces around behavioral science to weave in. And I was like, actually, no, that needs to be like its own framework of itself, 10 C's, and that'll become a chapter of itself. And, that kind of, the epiphany moment where I'm like, I got to change that bit because it'll be better that way. So while I followed my matrix, which helped because I went, okay, this chapter is going to be about these things and blah, 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 and would just chip away at that over time, I still had that sort of flurry of ideas. And I think part of the challenge for me was knowing when to stop, because I kept coming back in and tinkering with it and kept tinkering with it. I'm like, you've just got to stop at some point and get the damn thing out.
Yeah.
Because yes, and Jade and I are nodding here. If you're listening to us and not watching us on YouTube, we're nodding here because yes, with the workshop, it's like a very public deadline. You got 20 people meeting you at 9 o'clock tomorrow. You better have this done or know how to iterate or whatever in the moment. A book is, there's no hard deadline. You got to sort of create that for yourself. And that's, I think there's so many people I talk to that have got to 90% and just haven't hit publish yet. So what's your advice for them?
Just do it.
I was just going to say the same thing. Just do it.
Pull a Nike and just do it.
Yeah. You can't overwork it. I think some people do have a tendency to overwork and underpublish and over edit. And you could do that forever. You could keep creating, taking bits out, putting in new ideas, but you just have to call it at some point. I think that's the bravest thing to do, is just call it.
Yeah. And I think setting myself a deadline, Leanne and I have had this discussion before in the context of marathons and triathlons. I'm more goal driven. I'm not goal driven, I'm deadline driven. So even though, yes, okay, it's a goal to write a book, actually getting there was setting a deadline. And so I just went, you know what, I'm going to have it out on this date. And that's just all there is to it. And so to get that deadline, especially when you're not working with a publisher, when you're self-publishing, yes. I think if you're working with a publisher, they probably go, you need to have it done by this date. But when you're self-directed and self-publishing, the only person who can give you that deadline is you. So I think I had to set myself a deadline. Otherwise, I could have kept tinkering with it forever. But now I'm at that point where I'm like, okay, it's out, and any changes I want to make, that can be the second edition in a couple of years or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Jade, remind me, so we saw Steve Bartlett the other week. Wasn't he talking around that I've listened to so many podcast conversations since. I'm pretty sure Steve said this during his speech. Was he talking about that commitment to yourself? Was he talking about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is a really good point that he made. And it was about building confidence. And if you don't have much confidence in yourself, a really good way to do that as a foundation is to not let yourself down. So when you make a promise to yourself, you keep the promise, no matter what it is, no matter how small it is. I'm going to fold that basket of laundry, and then you do it. And that's a little bit of confidence because you've done it. So yeah, I think, like you're saying, Mel, you set yourself a deadline and then you got there. That's a massive confidence boost. Well done.
Especially for someone with ADHD, because it could be a real tendency to go, this is fun for a while and write, and then just go, next, and never actually finish it. So I'm just happy I finished it, to be perfectly honest.
Huge. It's a huge thing, right? And I think because a lot of the work that we do is service oriented, giving advice, running workshops. These are intangible things. We rarely ever get to hold something and go, this is something I've created. I mean, both of you can draw and create that, but I've never been able to go like, hey, here's something. It's a distillation of ideas. It's such a proud moment. So, but the thing is, I mean, this is the crazy thing. You hit publish and then it's like, oh, the marketing. I'm going to now, it's not over. The finish line has moved. The goalposts have moved. How have you found that process? I'll go to Jade. I mean, let's kick off. You had a launch party to celebrate. So Mel and I were both there. That's related to workshop experiences. Can you share a bit about your launch party with listeners?
Yeah, sure. That was so fun. So I wasn't really sold on having a launch party because it was so stressful and so much work to get the book to where, to be able to publish. But then I was like, no, I actually need to celebrate this. I need to put a flag in the ground and go, yeah, let's celebrate that I've done this amazing thing. So I organized a launch party, and it was quite interactive. And Leanne, you were there helping me host, and you were really great giving me the Q&A. I thought a Q&A was a really good way to offset the nervousness that I had about speaking about my own work, because the self-promotion part of it is not my strength. So when we're talking about coming now from publishing and then suddenly you've got to start marketing, it's a whole different project. It's a whole different mindset. It's a really big thing. I think writing might have been a bit easier than the marketing part, actually. I can sit down and write a book and be here in my own little bubble, nice and safe, just me and the words. But then when you've got to share it with the world, that's a whole different story. Yes, but the launch party was a really good way to get that started, to sort of kick that process off. So yeah, I think I recommend doing something, even if it's small, just with a few group of friends. It really does kick off that marketing sort of process.
I just want to call out a few activities for listeners that weren't able to make it to Brisbane for Jade's launch party. So in her book, she's got activities like what are your values? And so what Jade did was print off a list of values. Everyone got handed 3 stickers, yellow stickers that would pop up and do like a group voting. So that was a really nice way to get people talking. She also, I really like do you want spiked lemonade or sober lemonade? Like just making the themes come to life. And so in a really creative way. Mel, talk us through, you published the book and now you're hitting marketing. Like, what's that like for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting because it's quite different to marketing yourself as like a business, I think. So marketing a product as opposed to our consulting and training business, it's quite different. I have built up my channels over the last few years. So I've got, my email list and I've got my podcast and socials and all that sort of stuff. But I think for me, a large part of writing this book was about business development. So it's less about selling stacks of copies. I wish I had a coffee, copies. And it's more about how that helps to drive. So I've sent copies out to past clients, current clients, people I want to work with as well, just to kind of go, hey, here I am, with little handwritten notes and all that sort of stuff to just try and drive that. I have toyed with the idea of a launch party, but there's a part of me that goes, who would come? Like it's a book about change
We
comms.
would. You got your first 2 guests here.
I mean, even if it's just us 3 and some cocktails, I'm here for it. But it is one of those things I'm like, oh, would anybody actually come to a launch party about a change comms book? So I'm still kind of toying with that idea, but we have got some plans for later in the year to, share the stories with people. So, maybe it's just that at that point. But yeah, marketing, not my forte, not my background. So it has been, interesting getting into that frame of mind.
Yeah, I honestly feel like the marathon's complete, but then they've said, oh, now you're about to run an ultra marathon. Like now you got to run an extra. It's like, and it's always there. It's kind of always in the back of your mind. And I think, I'm celebrating my 1-year book anniversary in a month, and I think I haven't gone as in
a year already.
It's been a year already.
Bloody hell.
I know, crazy. But I think the goal for me was to like set off the flywheel, try and get that sort of get its own momentum, and then I can sort of sit back a bit. And I definitely do want to write another book, but this just the season for it. I'm not in that training season just yet. I'm not even ready for pre-season. So, and I think we didn't talk about this aspect. Like before you even start writing, like making a decision on the scope of what you attack. It's like when I get my nails done, I can't even pick what color nails I should get. There's so many variables. Like where will I be going? And then a book is really about who do you want to be? Like what type of work do you want to attract? What clients do you want to appeal to? These are fundamental identity questions. So I know I'm sort of backpedaling here, but I'm really curious around just making that decision. I know, Mel, you alluded to it, there's no change comms book out there. So you felt sort of that need in the market. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Mel, before I
Yeah, I say this in the book. Change comms itself has become a specialization.
Mm.
And there is this kind of thought in the comms world and even in business world that if you can do communications, you can do change. And it's like, well, no, they're two very different skill sets. So I wanted to kind of use it as an educational tool as much as anything else around how this is a specialization now. Uh, and it's for people who, I thought about, well, who comes to us and asks us questions? Who asks us about, and what do they ask us most frequently? And definitely through the work that I've done with my blog and podcast and all that sort of thing, anytime we talk about change, there's a spike in viewership or listenership. So it really did say, okay, it shows me that there's a market there for it. There's people who want to learn more about change. And there's people who want to learn more about comms. So people who are change managers or project managers or even just team leaders who, they're going to have to lead change at some point. Those people need this as well. So yeah, that's kind of where my thinking was around audience.
Yeah, so listening and validating it, like a mini listening tour and then responding to that need.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I did the same thing with the 2-hour workshop. I went through my flip chart and I was like, what questions? And someone's like, how do I run a 2-hour workshop? I'm like, oh, that'd be a kind of fun one to just, it's so specific and hyper niched. And Jade, your book is more general. There's so many people your book is, appealing to at a certain moment in time in their lives. How did you decide to really focus it on that?
Yeah, I guess part of it was my own experiences going through some pretty challenging life things, and also just seeing the way that I see the world with an autistic ADHD brain, picking up patterns. So I can see my pattern recognition is that there's a lot of challenge with mental health with people, and we all go through really hard stuff at various times of life. And I wanted to create something that was maybe selfishly a little bit cathartic for me to get out, my processes of how I've dealt with stuff. But I thought, well, if I can share that with other people and they could learn something, then that would be, that's something I've given to the world that I can help people with. So it was really just a gift. I don't know, it sounds a bit weird, but like, yeah, it's like, here's a bunch of things that I did, and here's a lot of questions that you could think about. And I hope that you learn something about yourself from this, basically.
Oh, I love that. That's a really compelling, like those 3 questions are quite good that you just shared then. I think back to marketing, Mel, you sent us a WhatsApp message the other day, really great idea around a book fair.
Yeah.
This is the first we've actually spoken about it. I mean, apart from WhatsApp, but I think it's super exciting and really great idea. So, and you're using your network to fuel that as well.
Yeah. So I was thinking about, and for those who aren't in Australia, this might sound a bit weird, but when we were in primary school, there used to be the scholastic book fairs. I don't know if you remember those, Leanne. You got them to
Yes.
Jade and NZ, yeah. And so like the Scholastic company would come out with all these books and a catalogue, and you ticked off what you wanted and showed it to your parents and like, you can't have 20 books. So go back and whittle that down. But that was kind of the idea was we have, just in our own circle in Brisbane even, we have so many amazing authors, self-published and published through publishers, and just in the last few years too. So we thought, why not bring everyone together, and rather than try and get people to different launches and all that sort of thing, have a book fair and celebrate and these authors who are in our community. So we're going to run it with IABC, so International Association of Business Communicators, which is a mouthful, but the Queensland chapter. And I really hope we can make it an annual thing where we invite published authors from our community to come and bring their books, and people can mosey around Scholastic book fair style and flick through them, but also have that opportunity to meet the authors and talk about their books and the process, like we're doing right now, the process of writing a book as well. So yeah, hopefully that'll all go ahead in November.
That is amazing. Can't wait. Like,
Very exciting.
So exciting. When you mentioned Scholastic, my word association was the Babysitters Club.
Say hello to your friends.
Doing right now. Yeah. Love them. And yeah, gosh, I need to get back to reading some fiction. Now, of course, we'll put links to all your books and your work in the show notes for this one. But Jade, any sort of final thoughts for listeners, either that are aspiring to write a book or you want to share a message from your book as we close off today's conversation?
Yeah, look, thanks so much for having me. And I am thrilled to share this work with people. And I hope that people will learn something about themselves. And I am planning to develop as I was talking about earlier, the starting with yourself and then your relationships and then the context. I'm planning to develop workshops around that process for communications, for business purpose and values and things like that. So I'm looking forward to, sort of adapting, I guess, making lemonade from a personal stance into making lemonade at work. So that'll be really exciting.
That's cool. And it shows the utility of like having that framework is that you can create workshops built on those different segments. Very cool. How about you, Mel?
Like Jade said, thanks for having us in this chat. It's been fun. And I think if you read my book, I would love to know how you're using the framework as well, because, it's open to interpretation. It's open to be tinkered with, however suits your context that you're in. But also, if you are somebody who's thinking about writing a book, I'm sure any of us would be happy to chat to you and be a sounding board for your ideas. So happy to have a chat anytime. Get in touch.
Oh, lovely. All right. And I mean, I'm so overjoyed that you both made the time. We could get a time all together to celebrate this as well and recognize like the efforts and also share lessons learned, because the process, while it's great to have this published book, it's like the process can be a bit messy. It is hard at times, but the key messages are just channel your inner Nike and get it done and share your ideas as a gift to the world is what Jade would share. So thank you so much for being on the show, both of you. Thanks, Jade. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.